Glad you could join us. And in our first story, Vice President Dr. Bawumia has hit back at former President John Dramani Mahama, saying Mr. Mahama is embarrassing himself by criticizing government's handling of the COVID-19 fight. Dr. Bawumia was responding to recent comments the former president made about how the halter project started in the previous regime has badly affected how Ghana is dealing with the pandemic. The vice president, who was interacting with the media after chairing a coronavirus meeting at Jubilee House Monday morning, said no government in the Fourth Republic has delivered as much infrastructure in its first term as the Akufo-Addo-led government.
The NDC was in government for 8 years. They may think that we have short memories, but we can still remember very clearly that after 8 years that they had in office, in government, to demonstrate their prowess in managing this country and managing the economy, after 8 years, what did they leave us with? They left us with declining agriculture, declining industry, interest rates were high, inflation was high. In fact, if you look at the data, in terms of macroeconomic performance in any economy, since the year 2000, the tenure of the former president was the worst in terms of outcomes in macroeconomic performance. That's the data, it's not me saying it. The banking system was weak, unemployment was rising, our national health insurance was back to cash and carry. We had 4 years of doomsday with its devastating impact on our economy. And not even withstanding that, electricity prices were being increased by an average of 45% between 2010 and 2015. Our public finances were in a precarious state, of course, that resulted in us having to go to the IMF for a bailout and policy credibility. Prices were being increased. There was a freeze on public sector recruitment, cuts in allowances for teachers and lecturers, cuts in allowances for lecturers, abolition of teacher training allowances, abolition of nursing training allowances, and even for teachers who had worked for 2-3 years, they were being paid just 3 months of allowances. I mean, common chalk was even a problem in our schools. And this is really the history that the NDC would want us to forget, and which we should not forget. Our memories should not be that short. We should remember what they did. And Nana Addo Akufo-Addo took over the reins of government in 2017. After just over 3 years in office, he's been able to manage the transformation of this country, and we have been able to perform much, much better than the situation we inherited. In fact, the data is very clear. And so my humble advice to former President Mahama is to take a look at the data. This is not green book data. This is just the data, right? Take a look at the data before you speak. Otherwise, you will end up embarrassing yourself.
Now, on leadership in times of crisis, Dr. Bawumia said President Akufo-Addo has demonstrated competence amidst the COVID-19 pandemic better than the former president, who failed to properly manage the doomsday situation during his time.
If you want to test the robustness of an economy, you test it in a time of crisis. Thankfully, we have had 2 crises. Under the NDC, there was an internally generated crisis, which was doomsday. Under the presidency of Nana Akufo-Addo, there has been an externally generated crisis, which has been the global coronavirus pandemic. I just want you to ask yourselves, how have these 2 crises been managed? The doomsday crisis, which crippled this economy for 4 years. What were the mitigating measures offered to businesses and individuals during doomsday? This was an internally generated crisis. We saw that even during doomsday, electricity prices were being increased. Fuel prices were being increased. Teacher training allowances were being cancelled. Nursing training allowances were being... All of that was happening during that particular crisis. You look at the coronavirus crisis and you look at the difference in terms of what has happened. The president has reduced electricity prices, made it free for lifeline consumers, has given free water for all Ghanaians for 3 months, has made sure that there is a stimulus package of 600 million Ghana cedis for businesses. And we have seen domestic production of PPEs, personal protective equipment for our health workers locally. So that the difference couldn't be more stark between the leadership under a crisis under the DUMSO and that under the coronavirus epidemic. So I ask a simple question. Who will you trust in a time of crisis? The answer, I would say, is very, very clear. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has shown leadership and concern for ordinary Ghanaians.